All right, hello and welcome back from your extended spring break. This is a primary way that we're going to be communicating over the extended cancellation. So let's talk about some online procedures for how the class is going to work on a daily basis. Before we do that, let's just look again at an email that I sent out to all my AP students in Lit and Lang about some of the College Board's changes in light of coronavirus. All right, so they have pivoted to a 45-minute online exam that students can take from home. You will receive AP credit and college credit for these altered exams, so they're certainly worth preparing for, taking seriously, and doing an excellent job on. We're going to know more. I'm going to know more about this exam, these alterations, as we move forward. And I'll keep you abreast to those changes as I am learning them myself. All right. So here's probably most importantly for right now. Here's what we're doing in light of these changes. First of all, we're going to stick to our regular curriculum as much as possible, although it is going to be streamlined, cut down, and made more efficient in order to make this online thing work smoothly. Okay, I understand you've got multiple classes going on. I understand everyone's learning new platforms and doing different things. So we're going to streamline things, but we're still going to accomplish the major tasks that we set out to accomplish from the beginning of the year, no matter what, right? Corona's not going to stop us from accomplishing our major tasks. We can adapt, but we're not going to completely abandon anything, all right? Now, there's most likely not going to be a writing portion of the test, so you can expect that I will evaluate the writing portion of the exam in some way by the end of the year, okay? Finally, the multiple choice sections of the work on AP Classroom, which you can't read that probably on the document camera, but that just says AP Classroom, is all the more important, okay? So those are not little arbitrary things to do in your spare time. Those are the probably most one-to-one similar kinds of things that are going to be evaluated on your online exam. So you need to be making sure that you are spending a significant portion of your week thinking hard about those progress checks and reading those documents carefully and doing your absolute best. Because if you're not doing your absolute best on those, then it's going to be very difficult for me to get a picture of where you actually are. All right, if you're Christmas treeing them or you're kind of just like gliding through them, then that's not really giving me a picture of your genuine progress, right? So in light of the fact that we're pivoting to the 45-minute online exam, we're not going to abandon the whole curriculum, but I am going to add more emphasis to multiple choice preparation. We're going to be looking at some poems, we're going to be looking at some prose passages and answering multiple choice questions about them, hopefully on a weekly basis in preparation for that 45-minute online exam. Okay, so those are some of the shifts, some of the adjustments, some of the adaptations that we're making in light of the College Board's pivot. Okay. So let's talk about how this class is going to work or should work on a daily basis. All right, so I sent you an email out yesterday on Wednesday about what a healthy sort of daily routine would look like. And that routine should start with you getting on the YouTube channel, finding the day's lecture that had been assigned to you, and leaving me a comment by 3 p.m. And that is how I will mark you present for the day. All right, so again, you will be marked absent if you do not leave a comment. So leaving a comment is not like optional. It's not like a little like fun addendum. It's how I'm measuring whether or not you were there. Okay? I don't really have another way of doing that. So that's how I'm going to be taking attendance. So make sure that you do that. It's not optional. Make sure you're being faithful and responsible in doing that. All right. Reading check procedures. Okay, so you will have reading to do throughout the course of quarter 4 and throughout the course of the extended cancellation while we're going online like this. But instead of a 5-question quiz that's going to evaluate your reading, you're just going to send me an email. that says, that articulates the percentage of the reading that you've completed. All right. So whatever day it's due, okay, whether that be, like Monday, this coming Monday, you have some reading due. Okay, you're going to read some poems. You're going to read, I think, chapter 18 of the text. We'll look for sure when we look at the top of the week announcements in just a second. All right, but when you're done with that, by 3 p.m., you just send me an email. Tells me the percentage of the reading that you've completed. Very simple. Okay, OTN procedures. All right, you still have OTNs. And your daily work is still to write your OTNs. And if you're an AP class, you still need to write those OTNs in prose. Okay, this is still a composition class. All right, and you should try and write them in one sitting. All right, you should try and write them in 40 minutes. Okay, just like we have been working on. All right, so the day that the OTN is due, I'll let you know when that is. All right, just because you have OTNs on your RenWeb homework, that just means you need to be working on it consistently. But I'll make it very clear when that OTN is due so that you can send me the confirming email the next day. All right, it will be written in bold. The OTN 4 is due tomorrow. Send me the confirming email, okay? Got it? It will be written in bold, it will be very clear on RenWeb, and it will be announced on the video lecture. So tune in to both the video lecture and RenWeb, and everything should be clear. All right. Now, major assignments. We're still going to be taking tests. We're still going to be taking writing essays, and we're still going to be completing our MWEs, except for King Lear. You do not need to write an MWE for King Lear. I'm going to cut that out of the curriculum just to trim the fat just a little bit. Not that the MWE is fat. It's good meat on its own, but just to streamline things, okay, just to take some things off your plate, make sure that we can focalize on the test, make sure we can focalize on the essays, make sure we can focalize on the daily OTNs and the reading that we have assigned for us, okay? So we're just sort of narrowing the focus of the class so that we can do the major things well. All right, great. Let's flip this over and look at what you need to do over the next couple days. All right, so obviously this is what we got through in the week before spring break. All right, we're in the middle of our poetry unit. We're going to be taking our poetry test in the coming weeks. So in order to make sure that we're prepared to do that, we're going to do OTN 4, which is an analysis of 2 Dickinson poems. We're going to look at, we're going to begin OTN 4 at the end of this class. We're going to listen to and engage with the content of Lecture 6. We're going to complete OTN 5, and we're going to complete the Unit 4 progress check by Tuesday. And finally, we're going to look at Lecture 7. This is all going to happen during this extended week. Extended meaning Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week. All right, so all this is just a big week since we've cut down this week. All right, now you do have some reading. Your reading of the prose section of Chapter 18, Sound is Meaning, that's going to be due Monday, March 30th. All right, so email confirmation by Monday, March 30th. You also need to read I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died and God's Grandeur by Gerard Manley Hopkins. All right, by, once again, Monday, March 30th. Okay, complete your OTNs as we complete them in class. We're going to begin OTN 4 today, work on OTN 4 tomorrow, finish OTN 4 probably next Monday, and then it will be due. I'll ask for email confirmation when the time comes. Okay, so just tune into the video lectures, follow in RenWeb, you'll be all good. Finally, you need to make sure that your Unit 4 progress check is completed by Tuesday, March 31st. Okay, keep working on the road MWE. That still needs to happen for the AP curriculum. If you are in Honors English 4 and you're doing the road MWE while you're in quarantine or and facing the apocalyptic end of the world, which is a nice parallel to the roads themes and dominant mood, then you can definitely get extra credit for that still. But nobody needs to write an MWE for King Lear. Okay, so let there be great rejoicing. We're still going to study King Lear. We're still going to write about King Lear. We're still going to take a test on King Lear, but we're not going to write an MWE for King Lear. Okay, so you can say that just saved an entire forest because Redmond doesn't have to write an MWE for King Lear. All right, like 200 pages. The trees are clapping their hands with joy right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn our attention to OTN 4, which is going to be a figurative language analysis of two prompts that rely, or sorry, two poems that rely heavily on figurative language. One, a great poem, one of my personal favorites, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun, all about anger and rage, two of my favorite emotions, all right, that I struggle with. And Much Madness is Divinest Sense, all right, both of which rely on figurative language heavily to develop their thematic impressions, all right. So the first poem that we're going to look at is My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun. We're going to analyze Dickinson's use of poetic devices to develop the thematic impression of the poem. We're going to consider all the devices we discussed up to this point in your analysis. Now, one of these two, if you are an AP, need to be written in prose, just like normal, okay? Nothing different, need to be written in prose, okay? So choose the one that you want to write in prose and go for it. We're going to be studying both in the video lectures fairly briefly, all right? Now, if you need to remember or review the figurative language lecture, then you can go back to lecture 5, look through your notes, okay, which identified what figurative language is. Generally, it explained two very popular forms of figurative language, metaphor and simile, which generated by comparison and connotation. Talked about personification and apostrophe. Talked about overstatement, understatement, metonymy, synecdoche, paradox, pun, all right, and double entente. And finally, it talked about symbolism, okay? So you need to have a clear understanding of what all of this language means, okay? Not just a vague understanding of what it means, but a clear understanding of what each of these concepts refer to, so that when we talk about them, all right, you know what we're talking about, not just vaguely, but specifically and precisely, okay? So, in an attempt to complete the task that has been set before us in OTN 4, let's go ahead and find our way to the poem, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun. Now, obviously, I'm using Poetry Foundation copy, which you can do as you if you want, or you can find this poem in your textbook, all right? So if you need to pause the video to get there, make sure that you get there. And in the last portion of this class, in our first half of the analysis of this poem, we're just simply going to be conducting an SQ3R to develop a basic comprehension of what the poem is saying before we get into our analysis of the poem. All right, so our basic task for OTN 4 is to analyze how the poem's style, how the poem's language, its use of language, sounds, visual structures, all of the stylistic elements associated with poetry, how it uses style to develop its thematic impression, to develop some kind of idea, some kind of insight into the human condition. All right. So before we do that, right, before we analyze the poem in any reasonable way, what we need to do is just understand what the poem has said on a basic level. So the tool that I like to use to do that is SQ3R, and I would highly recommend using this reading strategy both on your SAT, ACT, and also on your upcoming 45-minute AP Lit exam. The reason why I think this is a wise thing to do is because it focalizes your attention on the basic features of the text and helps clarify, all right, what basic main idea you should be focalizing your attention on as you read, okay? So let's survey the text before we get into reading it, right? First, we need to look at who's speaking, right? Who is the speaker of the poem? Well, to put it simply, and this is actually a tricky question with this poem, in fact, one of the keys to interpreting the poem is just identifying who is speaking. Who is saying my life? Whose life, right? Who is my? Who is the loaded gun, and who is the owner? Well, after some careful reflection, I think we can reasonably assert that the individual who is speaking is someone who is meditating. It's just an individual, it's a person, who is meditating on her relationship with anger. All right? So the speaker likens her life, herself, to a loaded gun, all right? And it's carried away by the quote-unquote owner who uses it to hunt, to kill, and rest with it in stanza 4 above its head. The owner uses it as a deadly weapon for any enemy of his. So I think the conceit, the poetic conceit, a conceit is just an extended metaphor, right? That's established in the first line, basically suggests to us that the speaker, all right, is someone who is meditating on her relationship with anger, all right? So the speaker is the, quote, loaded gun, and anger is the owner, all right, or the master, right, that comes and possesses her, carries her away, and uses her how he wants to. All right. What's the genre of the poem? It's just a lyric poem. It's a short poem that meditates on with one speaker. A short poem with one speaker that meditates on a certain concept. Obviously, what's being meditated on here is the nature of an individual's relationship to wrath or rage or anger, especially pent up or loaded, repressed anger. All right. The poem's structured into 6 quatrains within a regular rhyme scheme. For those of you that are interested, it's metered in what you call the common meter. You can sing the whole poem to the tune of Amazing Grace because it's written in 8 and 6. All right, so 8 iambic. My life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day. Okay, that's just kind of a weird little factoid. Emily Dickinson wrote a lot of her poems to mimic some hymn styles. Obviously, she wasn't a Christian, and she certainly wasn't. Her poetry wasn't meant to sort of be Christian worship like a hymn would, and so she's using that and alluding to it kind of ironically, right? Finally, let's talk about the title. My life had stood a loaded gun. Well, that really technically, this poem has no title. It's just poem number 764 from Dickinson's sort of poetic body of poetic work. But obviously what it does is it establishes the central poetic conceit that's going to be established and developed throughout the course of the poem, right? My life, okay, so what used to be mine, right, me, my life, had stood. It used to be mine, right? That's called the past perfect tense. And we use this kind of verb tense with words like until, typically in English. My life had stood blank, 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 until something interrupted my own self-possession, right? And the thing that interrupts her self-possession is the owner, which comes and possesses her, which comes and carries her away. All right. So my life had stood a loaded gun. Now, obviously, a loaded gun is not just a gun. She emphasizes the fact that the gun is loaded, that it's locked and it's loaded and it's packed with powder and it's ready at any spark to blow, to explode with a kind of violent outburst. Okay, so obviously, right, my life had stood a loaded gun. The first line of the poem introduces the basic poetic conceit. It suggests to us that the speaker is no longer in control of her own life. She used to be, but she's not anymore. All right, and that her life, right, her life force is likened to this sort of tool that is used to kill. All right, a gun, a weapon, right? Okay, this is not like anti-gun poetry, okay? It's just about the connotations of the image, all right? So it's just, sidebar, right? Okay, so what central question should we be asking and answering through the course of the poem? Basically, how does the poem's style develop the thematic impression of the piece, right? How do the elements of the poem style develop the main idea that is explored throughout the course of the poem? All right, so let's read the poem. Let's recite what it means. It's kind of a tricky little read, as much of Dickinson's poems is, because she leaves out words. She uses capitalization really erratically and strangely. So let me just read the poem. All right, read along with me. I'm going to recite what each stanza means on a literal level, and then tomorrow we're going to sort of go back through it with a fine-tooth comb analyzing the language, and developing our understanding of Dickinson's thematic impression. All right? So normally these videos will be about 25, maybe 30 minutes. So that's just kind of the daily rhythm that you should get into. All right, the poem begins. Dickinson writes, "My life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day. The owner passed, identified, and carried me away." All right, so the opening image on a literal level, we just get a picture of a loaded gun that is just sort of propped in the corner of a person's house. Okay, we kind of get a rural setting here. The owner, whoever this is, this mysterious owner, right, which is obviously metaphorical, but the owner of the gun just passes by it, identifies the fact that he needs it, wants to use it, and then carries it away. All right, it finds the gun and carries it away. On a basic level, the gun is now in the owner's possession, is now under the owner's control. Second stanza, "And now we roam in sovereign woods, and now we hunt the doe, and every time I speak for him, the mountains straight reply." Okay, on a literal level, basically, the owner has taken the gun out into the woods and is hunting doe, is trying to shoot a deer, probably to eat it. All right, and every time I speak for him, right, how does a gun speak? Well, it's fired, and its report, the report of the gun, echoes throughout the mountains that surround the speaker and the speaker's owner. Third stanza, this is a tricky little stanza. "And do I smile, such cordial light upon the valley glow." All right, so this is kind of inverted syntax here. Let me disentangle the syntax of what Dickinson is saying here. She's saying, "And do I smile," which is to say, "and if I smile," or "when I smile." "When I smile, such a cordial light upon the valley glow." Okay, in other words, when I smile and illuminate the valley or my surrounding setting with the cordial light of my smile, it is as a Vesuvian face. Mount Vesuvius is obviously a volcano, right, in Italy. It is as a Vesuvian or volcanic face had let its pleasure through. Okay, so the image here we get is basically a person with a bunch of pent-up aggression and rage who is sort of faking a cordial smile, right, even as they hide or repress very obvious rage, anger, wrath, all right, that is sort of beneath the surface, very similarly to the volcanic potential of Mount Vesuvius, which sort of hidden beneath the surface, perhaps on the outside, looks like a peaceful, sublime mountain, but at any point could erupt in massive, devastating, deadly, violent lava, ash, and all the other things that come with a volcanic eruption. So basically, right, that's on one level, that's the image, and on another level, right, we apply this to the conceit of her being compared to a loaded gun. So how does a gun smile? It fires, right? And when the gun fires, right, and sends down a kind of cordial light that illuminates the valley, right, with its light, it does so in the way that perhaps a person who has lots of repressed anger would smile, right, in a way that very obviously is kind of hiding a repressed violence, okay? And when at night, right, the scene changes, we go to the nighttime, and when at night, our good day done, I guard my master's head, okay? The owner here, the master, obviously has mounted the gun on a gun rack above its head. Well, you know, kind of a normal kind of thing to do with a gun. it's better than the eider duck's deep pillow to have shared. In other words, the master has a very comfortable relationship with his gun. It makes him feel comfortable, right? An eider duck is just is a duck whose feathers would be used to make down pillows, really soft down feather pillows. It's also a kind of duck that plucks its own feathers in order to make its nest. All right, so that's a somewhat interesting little image there. To foe of his, to enemy of my master, I'm a deadly foe, I'm a killer. No one stirs, none stir the second time. On whom I lay a yellow eye. So you could think of an eye aiming down the sight of a gun, or you could think of the yellow eye, the barrel of the gun, as it fires, right, leaving a kind of muzzle flash at the end, or an emphatic thumb, right? The emphatic thumb there is what is used to cock the hammer of a musket to prepare to fire it, all right? Now, the final stanza is a kind of tricky little use of wordplay here, so I'm going to break it down for you. Though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill without the power to die. Okay, so let me disentangle this for you for a moment, right? Here, what the speaker is basically saying is, though I being the individual who has been possessed by its new owner, this rage, this anger that animates, that carries him, that moves her around, right? Though I, then he, may longer live. In other words, the individual can outlive his or her anger, right? You animate your anger. You give it life. You feed it, right? You allow it to carry you away, right? You can live longer than it. The speaker then says, he longer must than I. In other words, my anger must outlive me. In other words, I can't live without it. Okay? This anger, this rage, this sense of deep injustice, this sense of deep dissatisfaction is something that makes me, it's all that I know. Okay? I can't live without it. He must live longer than me. For with him, right? For with my anger, I have the power to kill. We'll talk about this little extra word, but the power to kill. But basically what the speaker is saying is, when I have my anger, when I have my rage, I have the power to kill. All right? I feel empowered. Right? I feel like I have power over life and death. I feel protected. And without that anger, without that rage, I have the power to die. I feel vulnerable. I feel reminded of my own mortality. I feel reminded of my own vulnerability and weakness. I have the power to die. So, although the speaker seems to understand that she could outlive her owner, she doesn't want to, because the speaker in this final little riddle of a stanza says that in a strange way, right, her anger, her rage, her wrath it makes her feel empowered. It gives her the power to kill. And without it, she would feel vulnerable. Okay? Tomorrow, we're going to get into a careful analysis of the poem as a whole. Hope you guys have a great day.